just reiterate that the standing orders provide for their suspension, and also that the work of the committees are set out in the standing order, and the oversight work is much bigger than a limit to the political directorate.
His mic is on. Your turn.
Member from Eastern Westmoreland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have inherited quite a few things. And one of the things that we inherited is the system of governance that we use. Now, when you inherit something, you know, it's like you have to understand that you may not be able to use it in its entirety, and there is some modification that is required, because what obtained in the jurisdiction that you inherited it from may be a little bit different. So the Westminster model of government that is practiced in the UK, they have about 650 MPs, members of parliament. For a political party to be victorious, they need 326. But they only have about 120 ministers of government. Therefore, the legislature is not overrun by the executive, as is the case here, because we only have 63. And for a party to win, they need to get 32. And what has happened in this particular instance is that majority of the members of the government side have been appointed to the executive, only leaving 5 of them on the backbenches. And that overrun of the legislature by the executive is what is at the root of this problem. Because if the government was to appoint committee members and they were not going to utilize members, as is outlined in section 68(3), where it says that subject to the provisions of Standing Order number 71, a sessional select committee shall consist of not less than 6 members, including the chairman, none of whom shall be a minister or parliamentary secretary. That's what it states. The reason why they're having a difficulty is because they chose to place majority of their members as a part of the executive. And it has only left 5 members that would need to serve on all of the committees. And therefore, we're seeing this situation. Now, this is not the first time that the issue of separation of powers is coming up, and there is what seems to be a manifest breach of it. In its previous iteration, this JP government decided to put the Chief Justice on probation. Yes. And that triggered a lot of criticisms, including from members of the judiciary. Judges actually protested. The idea of us observing and being true to the doctrine of separation of powers is well established. And there's obviously good reason for it. It is not in an attempt to give prominence to members here. So the advocacy is not to give some position to members who are on this side. That's not what we're talking about. The idea, though, is to provide protection to the people of Jamaica so that their rights are not trampled upon. It is clear that once you do not have the separation of powers, that you're going to concentrate too much authority in either an individual or a body, and that leads to the possibility of corruption and tyranny. That is clear. Now, in order for us, we love it, man, and I want you to also love it and shun it. Mr. Speaker, it is a previous leader of the Labour Party, a previous Prime Minister of the Labour.
Are you a trained solar contractor, installer, or a solar retailer? At EnerSave Solar, we have all the support.
Committees. The idea that when the Labour Party had 49 members, that they would have been more active has been proven to be false. Because during the preceding 5 years, we had less meeting than the 5 years before that they complained about.
Yes, 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 yes.
Most people make reference of things that they don't even know. It's like the Ethiopian eunuch. Do they even know of the things of which they speak?
No, they don't.
This has nothing to do with 20 years ago. Absolutely nothing to do with that.
Don't be sidetracked.
This has to do with the separation of powers to prevent the concentration of too much power in a single individual or body, and to ensure that the rule of law is supreme. That's what this is about. And so, Mr. Speaker, our Constitution and our democracy rests on the doctrine of the separation of power. This is to prevent the corrosive dangers of corruption and exploitation. We all must stand resolute to prevent such an eventuality. Thank you.
St. Andrew Southern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the first sitting of the new Parliament, on her appointment as Speaker, the member for East Rural, St. Andrew, indicated a determination to adhere to the standing orders in how this Parliament would be conducted. The two standing orders which are engaged in this discussion are Standing Order 68.3 and Standing Order 75.3. 68.3, as has been read, essentially says that these sessional select committees, which we're appointing today, should not include among their membership ministers or parliamentary secretaries. It is a fundamental standing order which supports good governance in our democracy. This is not about quibbling whether a question is, in fact, a statement, or you're speaking a bit too long, and the sort of things that often engage the Speaker at any given point in time in the cut and thrust of parliamentary proceedings. This is about the separation of powers, about accountability in governance, and about how Parliament should have appropriate checks and balances for executive excess. And that is why these sessional committees, which are review and oversight committees, are supposed to be established without the presence of persons from the executive thereon. There is no issue about government MPs being on them, and in fact, the rules provide for the government MPs providing a majority of the members of these committees. And it's based on the balance in a given parliament from time to time. That's in the standing orders. And while in Australia we heard they may think that that is not an ideal situation, it is what governs our parliament. The issue is executive influence, undermining the efficacy and transparency of oversight functions of parliament in our democracy. I'd also say that the way this motion was put did not make any reference to any suspension of the standing orders. There was a suspension of the standing orders to enable the motion to be put. But the substance of the motion simply said, notwithstanding 68.3 and so on. Notwithstanding 68.3, notwithstanding, it was repeated for each one of the elements of the motion. There was no invocation of the suspension of standing orders. And furthermore, I think it's an abuse of the standing order that provides for the suspension thereof for a fundamental standing order which is expressed in terms which precludes and prohibits a course of action to be pursued by invoking the provision that says that standing orders may be temporarily suspended. That is an abuse of that provision, and that's not the intention of that provision. The other standing order which is fundamental to this discussion is 75.3, and that deals with how chairmen are to be appointed for these sessional select committees. And it says that a select committee may elect a chairman from among its members. Therefore, for the leader of government business to purport today to determine who will be chairing these committees is ultra vires the rules of this House and ultra vires this particular standing order. There is nothing in the standing orders that authorize any departure from the provision that the members of the committee are to elect their chairman in relation to any of these committees, save and except those which specifically provide that the chairman is to be a particular individual. And there are a few like that. So, for example, the committee that deals with standing orders says in 70 subsection 2 says that the Speaker shall be a member and chairman of that committee. Similarly, the House committee also says that the minister in charge of arranging the business of the House shall be a member and the chairman of the House committee. And the Privileges Committee also says, the provisions there say that the Speaker shall be a member and the chairman of the Committee of Privilege. Those are the three where the standing order specifically authorized, in the case of the House committee, that the minister in charge of arranging the business of the House shall be. That is the only exception to the rule in the standing orders that ministers are not to be on these committees. So where we're heading today is a breach of the standing orders, is a breach of the principles of checks and balances in our democracy, and should not be supported. At the first sitting of this Parliament, I raised the issue of the chairmanship of these committees in light of the comment made by the Prime Minister at his swearing-in ceremony, invoking the spirit of partnership. And I said that if, as part of that partnership, we were hoping and expecting the reintroduction of a convention that had been established under a JLP government, when Prime Minister was Bruce Golding, that exhorted the members of the committees then to appoint an opposition member to chair the committees. It worked well. It was an improvement on our democracy. and it did not violate the standing orders because the specific standing order 75.3 allows it, allows that choice to be made by the members. When Portia Simpson Miller, the most honorable, became Prime Minister under the PNP government of 2012, we did not depart from that convention. To the contrary, we saw that it was an enhancement of our democracy, and we elected to follow it, and it has worked well. When the Jamaica Labour Party was returned to office in 2016, for that first term, they too, under Andrew Holness as Prime Minister, followed that convention. It was only after the 2020 election that there was a departure from that convention, and it was justified, in quotes, it was justified on the premise that the committees weren't performing adequately and that they would perform much more efficaciously if the government controlled the committees through appointing the chair. So the government has the majority on the committees, and the government appoints the chairman of the committees. That is the antithesis of oversight. As a member, the newly minted member for Northwest St. Catherine said, that is not an arena of accountability, that is a ring of self-defense for the executive. So, Mr. Speaker, it was with a strong sense of disappointment that I speak in this debate on this motion. I am extremely alarmed and disappointed that the government is proceeding down this undemocratic path in violation of the standing orders. I urge them to reconsider this, as we will not support this motion. Thank you.